Welcome back to the Work of Wellbeing podcast. I'm Amy Green, your host from The Wellness Strategy, and we're here to talk about all things personal and professional wellbeing. This podcast is designed to help you become curious and consider your everyday wellbeing strategies, what you do for your own wellness, and how you can start to transform your life both in and out of the workplace. Sit back, grab a cup of tea, maybe grab a notepad, a journal, and get ready to feel really enlightened about what wellbeing used to be, what it is now, and where you can take your own wellness strategy. It won't surprise you that I received lots of questions around workload. How do we make our workload fit into our day? What happens when we don't get non-contact time? There isn't enough dot to be able to complete everything. There isn't enough time during the work day. We don't have time to think about marking, reporting, and the turnaround schedule. My to-do list is longer than the time I have available. The workload is growing and getting out of control. What can we do? Now, I'm going to answer this question in a few different ways. Well, actually, it's a combined number of questions in one, because it is challenging for me to give exact answers for you when I don't know your setting. And so one of the things we do in Thriving Schools through our Beneath the Surface Day is really drill into what's going on in certain situations. And I can't do that through this. So what I'm going to do instead is share some overview answers that I would give often to people to help kickstart that conversation. And then what you can actually do is reflect on this yourself, take it to your team or your school, or if you're a leader, think about how you can take this back into your own school environment to start to consider, well, what are we going to do with this workload thing that we hear about so often? Now, I first of all want to start by saying, I don't think we can deny that workload hasn't increased. It definitely has, and it certainly looks different to perhaps when I started teaching, over 15 years ago, and people who have been in the profession even longer. What we've missed, though, is doing some key things. When we add workload, when we add something, what are we taking away? When we add something, are we actually doing it through the lens of considering, does staff have capacity to make X, Y, Z happen? Or are we doing it because it's great for the kids? And then all of a sudden we're like, whoa, now we have to make this happen. I see this a lot where a decision is made around putting on an event or adding something to the weekly timetable because it's great for the students, but without considering how do we do this through capacity in terms of time, energy, resources, and sometimes money. Is it actually possible? And so when we're looking at adding workload, we actually need to think about, do we have the capacity to do this? And what are we going to take away? Now, the other thing around workload is we don't always consider the how. So how are we implementing this? What is the system? What is the process? And too often we fall into the trap, whether it's around adding something or whether it is around reviewing something, by stopping at the idea that it's workload or it's time. What we need to do is think about, what is the process? What is the system? Is it efficient? I have lots of conversations with lots of educators and people in schools, and really what tends to happen is, yes, it can be a workload issue, but what we haven't considered is this actually an efficient and effective way of working? Or do we have lots of people doing the same thing when really we could be working smarter together? Are we actually doing something the way we've always done it without considering perhaps new technology we could use, or the process or system itself? Sometimes too, we fall into the trap of thinking, well, I just have to get it done because if I don't do it, it's not going to happen. And this is just the way it is. This is the way it's always been. These are not great excuses for high workload. And if you are saying, hearing, or thinking these things, it is an insight into probably the idea that you need to put pens down for a moment and ask, is this sustainable? Now, I also want to talk about something different around workload. And this is what I call the grey area. It's hard to measure workload in schools when there are grey areas around how we actually work. Now, this is very much educator, school leader specific. It is not if you work in another area of a school where you are corporate staff and you have defined hours, etc. In a school environment, and I'm going to speak very generically here around across the country, not necessarily your school or system specific, but around the country, our working hours in education are varied. Some places don't know start times, don't know finish times, don't have parameters around when we should be on email and when we shouldn't, don't have clear boundaries for work, which means we don't really know if these things are more workload or not, whether they're creeping into personal time or not. So one of my biggest, boldest ideas in the profession, some love it, some hate it, take it how you will, is that we need to remove the grey. This would mean for us as an entire education system, we need to define working hours. My interpretation of this, and I'm going to borrow the example from the ACT when I worked there, is being very clear. In the ACT, you're employed as a public servant. Work hours when I started teaching, they could be different, but I don't think they are 8:30 to 4:51. Students start at 9 o'clock. You're required to be on site 30 minutes prior. Your workday goes until 8:51. I don't know why it's 8:51. However, if you don't have a meeting on that day and you want to go to the hairdressers, go to the gym, pick your kids up, just go home and watch TV, you can do that. You can leave at 3 o'clock with the students. But that is 1 hour and 51 minutes of paid work time you would need to do somewhere else. How you do that is up to you. You have the autonomy. So if you want to start your workday at 7 a.m., get a whole bunch of things done when it's quieter and leave at 3:30, whatever it might be, knowing that you've done everything you need to do, great. The other thing I want to address here are the idea of term breaks or holidays, an area I like to call grey and loose, because let's be honest, it is. We all say we're working, we all say we're doing things, but in actual fact, are we supposed to? Are we getting paid? Are we not? Again, I'm going to borrow the concept from the ACT. This time in the ACT wasn't actually referred to as holidays for educators, it's holidays for students, and for teachers and educators, it was stand down time. Now, it was said that you could be called on site at any time during holiday or term break. I never was though. Occasionally we might have had PD, but that was communicated very well in advance. What was said was that it is planning and prep time. You could organise to come in and meet with your team. With your team, you might organise certain things that need to be done by a certain date. Usually in teams I worked in, we would want things done by the end of the first week. So the second week you go and rest and relax and enjoy, go to Bali, whatever. Occasionally I'd meet with teams in that first week. Sometimes we wouldn't, and we would have had a discussion prior to term break around what we needed to do. And then we had the autonomy to do that in our own time. Now, personally, I think this works really well. You know what's expected of you. You have accountability measures. You're very clear on what you need to use that time for. And you know what? If you want to do it from overseas or you want to go travel, you can do that, but there is an expectation around what needs to happen. This cleared up some of the murkiness because in term break, 8:30 to 4:51, every day for 2 weeks, you're being paid for that time. How you use it is up to you, but there's an expectation of what needs to happen. Now, I think all schools and systems could do with putting some parameters and boundaries in place like this that ensure people know when they're supposed to be working and when not. And if we think, you know what, I'm going to go at 3 o'clock today to go to the hairdressers, that's okay. You just make up that time at a time that suits you. Whilst we sit in the grey murky mess, it makes it really hard to measure workload. It makes it hard to be able to think about, well, is it too much? Is it too less? Is this actually an inefficient system because people are having to work longer or outside of that time? Now, I think what we need to acknowledge too is that work from home, time in lieu, having flexible working arrangements does exist in our profession, even if it's not communicated like that. But because of the murky grey area, it's a little bit hard to quantify. We all know people might be working at home, but if they know, you know what, I'm getting paid 2 hours at the end of every school day, and if I want to go do something fun and then work from 8 till 9 o'clock of an evening, that makes up for that. It helps people feel a little bit more affirmed in the decisions they're making. Because at the moment with the murkiness, it's not helpful. Now, I know some people would operate like this anyway and may or may not have had similar thinking, but it just makes sense to them. And for some people, they're craving it. And when we continually talk about things like, I don't have enough non-contact time, I can't fit everything in a 9 to 3 day, workload is too high, but we haven't tightened up the grey areas, it makes it really hard for us as a profession to be able to sort workload in a way that's sustainable for us. My other big bold idea while I'm on a roll here is to also share, I don't think at the moment the way these term breaks work is actually supportive, and I would like to see us reduce some of the intensification across terms so that we use term breaks to do some of the work that actually pulls us away from being able to do things that need to happen during the term. Imagine if we use term time for things like planning with our teams, moderation and marking, writing reports, parent-teacher meetings, perhaps running open days, doing things that take up a lot of time whilst we're also trying to lead and teach and make a difference for our students when they're there. If we remove some of that intensification, what we'd actually have is more time during the term time to rest and regulate and be on top of workload. And that's what people are actually asking for. This is why we need to tighten up what those term breaks look like and remove the grey. If we do this, we're going to have better ways of working because we know what's expected, and that provides us with a better lens to measure workload. Now, in this term break, I would be very happy to see something like in the first week, maybe we're on site for a couple of hours a day. That could look like an actual 9 to 3 day, so it's a little bit shorter than an 8:30 to 4:51 day. We have some flexibility around how we use it. And then in that second week of term break, you're free to use it how you like. You really are free to go and have a holiday, to go away somewhere, to do what you see fit. But there are clear things in place around what needs to be done by the time we return with students. We have autonomy around what that might look like for how we get it done, but there's accountability to ensure it happens, because there is absolutely no reason why it's good enough for an educator to turn up and say they're underprepared or unplanned or don't have anything ready for their students for the first few weeks of term. We're doing a disservice to ourselves because we're starting behind the 8 ball here and we're continually chasing our tail, and we're not doing a good enough job for our students. We need to change this. There is not time in the 9 to 3 day to do this. That's not how education was ever designed. But right now we need to tighten it up because that's what we're seeing in the world around what ways of working look like, so that we can start to think about sustainability and support. Now, the other thing I want to highlight around workload here, like I've mentioned a few times, it is very much school specific. What I mean is we have to be prepared to have conversations and not just workload's too much. We need to drill into what part of the workload, why isn't it working? What are we doing in our school to support it or to impact it? And how can we design better solutions, strategies, ways of working that are sustainable and allow people to do their job well? In a school, we should all feel well, work well, team well, and lead well. And when we get this right, what we're actually doing is creating space for all of the tasks that need to happen. And we're able to review workload in a really pragmatic way because we can see perhaps where the gaps are, where things are falling down, where our systems are inefficient. Now, that's not to say it's not work to begin with. And I also want to highlight that any change around how we work is going to take time. There's going to be a transition. There's going to be a messy middle. Some people will want it, some people won't. The way we go about it might be faster or slower than you would like. We have to be prepared to do this work together. It's not a leader's job and it's not leaders' responsibility to do all of the work. It's collective responsibility. We're the architects and the designers of our workplaces. We need to be prepared to step into that. The other thing I want to highlight too, because I have a few questions around it, is autonomy around workload. Do educators really have autonomy? We have autonomy in schools to influence and make change and make decisions around a number of things. Take a moment to list them all. It's a lot. And perhaps your starting school day, you get to decide what that looks like. Maybe not you personally, but as a school, how many lessons you teach a day, your pedagogical approaches, your planning templates, how teams are organised, what non-contact looks like, what events you put on, what school excursions and camps you go on, your school, in some situations, intranet system, your reporting, what non-contact looks like and how it's organised. We make these decisions, which means, yes, we have autonomy. Now, for an educator in a classroom, you have a lot of autonomy around how you spend your time out of class, your non-contact time. We need to develop systems and processes around this as well and be prepared to develop those routines and rhythms, not just be so reactive. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the personal wellbeing space around how we can use time. That wraps it up on workload. If you feel like I haven't answered your question or there's something that you still want to know more about, please contact me. I'm always adding content around how we can better have this conversation.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I really do hope you have enjoyed it. The information discussed today was just that, information only. It's not specific advice. If you take action following something you heard today, it's important to make sure that you get professional advice about your unique situation before you proceed, whether that advice be legal, financial, accounting, medical, or otherwise. Please reach out to me if you have any questions or if there's anything else I can do to support your own wellbeing and wellness journey, whether it's another topic you'd like me to discuss, or whether it's support in your school, workplace, or individually. And if you do know someone who might benefit from listening to this, please remember to tell them about it, share the episode with them, or suggest my Instagram, my website, or LinkedIn where they can find out more about me and what I do. And as always, I will see you in the next episode.